So I've got some pointers on how to make your car last 200,000 miles or better. These are things I've driven a lot of cars well over 200,000 miles, buying them new, of course. But there's just pretty simple practices that you can take to make your car last. I've got currently a Silverado with 200,000 miles on it, and I have replaced brake pads and battery, and of course oil changes, and that's all I have done to this vehicle. Now it's pretty simple to follow these rules, and you really need to buy a car new. You don't know how it was treated originally by the original owner, but number one, the absolute number one thing, when you start your vehicle, let it run for 10 seconds at least before you put it into gear. Now, if you're familiar with like checking your oil, you know that you can't check your oil when the engine's hot. You can't check it when the engine's running. You need to let the vehicle shut it off and then let the oil drain down to the pan and sit in the pan to give it an accurate reading when you're going to check your oil. Now, think about that. All of the oil from the engine, and you've got valves, you've got cams, you've got cylinder bearings, or crankshaft bearings, all kinds of bearings. You've got everything that needs to be lubricated in that engine. And when that oil sits at the bottom of the pan, it's not in the engine. It's down at the bottom of the pan. So when you start the engine, the oil pump has to pump the oil to the top of the engine, and then the oil flows down and lubricates all of those bearings. Now, this is why I say start up the engine and let it run for 10 seconds at least before you go into gear, before you put a load on the engine. Another thing that is very important when you're driving along, especially these Colorado roads, and then you see a bump ahead and you just can't avoid this bump, is to basically hold a neutral pedal. So don't accelerate, don't decelerate, don't press your brakes. Go over the bump with a neutral pedal. The reason being is if you accelerate, then you're putting a load on the transmission, the universal joints, the rear end. You're putting a load on all kinds of parts of the vehicle. When you accelerate, and in the air, the tires literally become airborne when you go over a bump, and they could basically spin in the air, and then once they hit the ground again, then it creates a load. And this creates a lot of problems for the transmission, just all kinds of parts. Even the engine, could take a hit from a bump that you're accelerating or decelerating over a bump. And that sounds difficult, but basically you see a bump ahead, just hold a steady pedal. Don't hit the brakes, don't accelerate, just hold a steady pedal when you go over a bump. Probably one of the most important things is the oil changes. And oil changes I do every 3,000 miles. I don't need to do every 3,000 miles. That Silverado has 200,000 miles on it, and I check the oil pretty much like once a week, when I drive it. And you're gonna burn oil with that kind of mileage on a vehicle. So I check the oil at least once a week on that thing. And I'm very uptight about oil changes, and 3,000 miles is important. Now, I see these newer cars, and I see these newer cars that the engine shuts off at a stoplight. And then when the light turns green and the person presses the pedal, the engine starts all of a sudden. And kind of like a golf cart. And I think this is one of the worst designs you could possibly have. If you have that option in your vehicle, turn it off. I think there's a little A with a circle around it, a button you can turn off that option. But that is exactly what I'm talking about. So you're sitting at a stoplight, all of the oil starts to drain down to the pan, away from the vital engine parts. And the longer you sit at a stoplight, the more oil drains out of the engine. And then once you start the engine again, you're immediately putting a load on the engine by pressing the pedal, and the oil has not lubricated the vital parts of the engine. Now, I don't know if they've come up with something that locks pressure on the engine oil. I kind of doubt they have. I think it probably just flows down, just like I'm saying it does. So these are some pointers that I hope is helpful to people. Just make your car last a long time. I've gotten a lot of life out of Jeeps and Chevy Silverados every vehicle I've had that I've bought new. Of course, I bought some used vehicles that weren't probably treated like that, obviously. But I hope this is helpful to people. Thank you.